Hey, it's Ari. This year on Thanksgiving, we're doing a special episode for the Made in America podcast. I've been so privileged and so impressed of all the great people we've had on the podcast, sharing what they make and develop right here in our great state. You know, when people think about manufacturing in Connecticut, they often think about jet engines, submarines, and helicopters. And we do make those things, and we make the best ones in the world. But that is by no stretch the sum total of the amazing products we manufacture here in this state. Whether it's sails and sailcloth, effervescent tablets, medical devices, wine, alcohol, chocolate, or beyond, every single manufacturer here in Connecticut is innovating, building, and growing our economy. I really hope you enjoy this episode. A quick interruption to remind you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better. I am really excited for today's episode. I am a lover of history and manufacturing history in Connecticut. And what better way to be able to talk about manufacturing history in Connecticut than with Capewell, one of the oldest manufacturers, the second oldest defense contractor in all of Connecticut, and my friend, President and CEO, Greg Bloom. Greg, thank you so much for coming on today.
All right, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, listen, it's my pleasure, but it's the Made in America podcast, Greg. So we start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
Wow, I should have known that was coming, but appreciate it. So Capewell started off with its roots working with Colt back in the 1880s, producing horseshoe nails for U.S. cavalry. And we sort of leveraged off of our experience with the U.S. government and throughout the 40s and created the first Capewell, which is the Kleenex of parachute releases. Worked with the Air Force, the Army, worked with Chuck Yeager through the years back in the day, developing a parachute or actually canopy release for Chuck and the Air Force. And then today we have bespoke custom airborne delivery systems and soldier life support systems.
Oh, that's a lot, right? All the way from horse nails for the cavalry to helping things fall safely out of C-130s to the ground and a lot of stuff in between. So I'm looking forward to sort of talking about that in the future of Capewell. But before we get into that, Greg, why do you do it?
Well, it's based in our foundation. Mr. Capewell was a big believer in service, as long as a lot of our previous CEOs, service to the customer and the country. We really lean forward and provide hardware and services for the kids that are going downrange, the men and women in service in uniform, providing for our national security in order to give them the best hardware and the best chance to win and come home to their families.
I am really excited for this week's episode. I'm with Brittany Isherwood, president of Burke Aerospace, a dynamic aerospace manufacturer with locations right here in Connecticut and one in South Carolina. Brittany, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Ari.
Well, listen, it's the Made in America podcast, so we start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
All right. So Burke Aerospace is a high-end electric discharge machining, turning, and milling facility. We have, like you said, two locations, one in South Carolina and one in Connecticut. And we are not only a service provider, but we also make engine components for the aerospace industry, as well as IGT and straight for the military since 1963.
Wow, long time in business.
All right.
So we'll definitely get into what you guys make, but let's talk a little bit about why.
Okay.
Why?
So, I mean, for me, for me personally, it would be for, my passion for manufacturing. I've been in manufacturing my whole career, and it's stemming back from my first day that I walked into Wentworth Institute of Technology for mechanical engineering. And that's really what started this whole, process for me. And then I guess for the why for our customers is we want to provide them with, the best product that they can ever receive with cost, quality, and integrity.
I'm here with Don Droppo, president and CEO of Curtis Packaging in their 176th year right here in Connecticut. Don, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, listen, man, it's the Made in America podcast. So we start off with the same two questions.
Let's go.
What do you make? Why do you make it?
All right. We make packaging, luxury packaging. However, we call it folding cartons, but luxury packaging for various segments in cosmetic. The segments are cosmetic, health, beauty, fragrance, as well as liquor. You can see some of our stars right here. We work with Titleist in the golf industry, chocolates, and we manufacture it all in Sandy Hook.
That's really fantastic. And for those of you that are watching, that aren't watching on YouTube but are listening, Don was really gracious and brought over a ton of samples. But it's just, I think the boxes are empty though, right, Don? We don't.
They are unfortunately empty. We usually have a policy with our customers: no free packaging, no free either golf balls or spirits. So sometimes we barter, but for the most part, unfortunately, right now they're all empty.
Empty. Well, listen. So you guys make amazing packaging for some of the biggest and best, most luxurious brands in the world.
Thank you.
But why do you guys do it?
Why do we do it? Because we love what we do. We love supporting these iconic brands in the industries that they're in. We like to play in the top part of the pyramid. You know, there's a part of the craftsmanship that we just absolutely love. We're not for the masses. We're definitely more of the higher end value add. And at the end of the day, when someone's opening up one of our boxes, it's going to bring a smile to their face.
I'm really excited to have Marietta Lee, Vice President and Corporate Secretary of the Lee Company on today. They've got over 1 million square feet and 1,000 employees here in Connecticut. I'm really excited to talk to Marietta about her views on manufacturing in Connecticut, where things are going, and just what we can do to improve the business climate here in the state. Marietta, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having me. Pleased to be here.
Absolutely. Well, listen, it's the Made in America podcast, so we start off with the same questions. What do you make? And why do you make it?
So we make, and it's a mouthful, we make miniature hydraulic components for aerospace, medical, and automotive applications. So basically little metal widgets that help control flow in various hydraulic systems. And why do we make it? That's a good question. My grandfather started the business over 70 years ago, and he was sort of a mad inventor. And he invented some great products, and there was a market for them. And he started making them basically in his garage, and it went from there.
I'm really excited for today's episode. We have Austin Mccord, who's the CEO of Kasana, the former CEO of Datto, fellow Connecticut resident, and somebody whose company I've done business with for a really, really long time. So special episode. Austin, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Listen, it's my pleasure. It's the Made in America podcast. So we always start off with the same two questions.
Okay.
What do you make and why do you make it?
Sure. Well, I've made a lot of things, but right now what I make is toilet seats, believe it or not. Which, yeah, that's the general reaction when you tell people you make toilet seats. But we make smart toilet seats, and our goal is to build and deliver a toilet seat that's actually a full-on medical device that can get your blood pressure, blood oxygenation, and a bunch of other vital signs about you. And we really want to deliver something that delivers clinical grade values so that your doctor could actually titrate your medication, so adjust what medications you're getting based on the data that's coming off the seat.
So the idea is sort of the why behind it then is really about driving better health outcomes for people?
Yeah, absolutely. And treating things like hypertension and heart failure in a non-invasive way that doesn't take any time out of anybody's life. And it's interesting, there's a ton of stuff out there right now. Like obviously you can go buy a blood pressure cuff and you can stand on a scale and use an SpO2 thing, but people don't do it. They'll do it twice or something like that, and then they just stop because it's like an extra thing they have to do in their day. And so the toilet seat is like the ultimate hack that you're coming. You are going to use this product whether you like it or not. And we can kind of guarantee that that's going to come around and happen. So we get the adherence part for free.
Right.
And then it takes an enormous amount of data science, math, and incredible sensor technology, because it turns out your butt is a pretty bad place to get vital signs about you. But we can pull this information out and then make it available and track it longitudinally, which actually ends up being really valuable in treating all kinds of different chronic conditions.
I'm really excited for today's guest, Molly Kellogg from Hubbard Hall. Molly, thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure, Ari.
Well, listen, it's the Made in America podcast, Molly. So we always start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
So, Ari, I'm afraid it might be a conversation stopper. We're in the chemical business. We make specialty chemicals, and they make metal products. They can make them a nice color, they can keep them from rusting, or they can make them more functional. So that's what we do. And why do we make them? Because anything, if you looked around and touched anything that was made of metal, if it didn't go through a chemical process, you couldn't use it.
Is that right?
It's true.
Because? Because
metal in and of itself will corrode or erode or not look pretty over time.
So if we want it to look good, be functional, not rust, have the right kind of like, properties to work with other metals, it needs to be coated with something.
Yeah, and I was going to steal I think it's the old DuPont line, the chemistry for better living, but it's kind of true.
Is it really?
It's kind of true, and it's everything low tech, from we're looking at a little spinny top there to something that would go in in a phone or a satellite, but anything touching metal. And every once in a while we get into some water treatment. So the water that you're drinking here might have gone through some of our chemistry.
Who doesn't love talking about chocolates? I'm with Carmen Romeo from Fascist Chocolates. He's the president and the son-in-law of the founder, a huge booster of manufacturing in Connecticut, involved in the community, and so much more. Carmen, thank you so much for coming on today.
Welcome. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Well, listen, man, it's the Made in America podcast. So we always start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
I make chocolate because people love it. But to be a little more technical, we are a confectioner. So we actually produce confectionery products from a chocolate made. And that's a whole different story. We don't make chocolate from a bean. We talk about it and teach it, but we make it from our raw material. It's not a bar of steel, but it's a bar of chocolate.
Really? So actually, let's pull on that for a second. So you get the chocolate and you then mold it. So maybe explain the differential.
So the very first step you do with chocolate is melt it.
Okay.
So when you look in our SIC code, the one right before us is chocolate made from beans.
Okay.
And we're the next one down that says confectionery made from chocolate.
Ah,
all right.
okay.
So yeah, we melt chocolate. That's the very first thing. And this is where the science begins, because to use chocolate, you need to temper it. And tempering is very molecular, crystallized structures and things like that. But once we start with a melted tank of chocolate, and depending on what machine we're using it in and what we're doing, whether we're molding a bar or coating a caramel or doing whatever with the chocolate or making fudge, we're cooking and assembling the chocolate, and eventually it gets to be something everybody eats.
I'm with Marcy Minnick, CEO of Accello Tool Engineering and Manufacturing. Very excited to have Marcy on, hear all about her background story and what's going on with her business here in Connecticut. Marcy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me today, Ari.
Well, listen, Marcy, it's the Made in America podcast. So we're going to start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
So we are a custom CNC job shop. We don't actually have a product line. We just manufacture milling and turning equipment for a variety of different industries throughout the state, throughout the nation, and throughout the world. The majority of our stuff tends to be in a bucket list of several different components. We do some commercial, we do some defense, we do some aerospace, we do some medical. We've been able to diversify our product line for quite some time.
Well, that's really awesome. So before we get into a little bit more of the what, why don't we get a little bit of the why? Why does Accello Tool exist?
So we have always been a support manufacturer for most of the industries throughout the state. We've existed because we have some of the finest machinists that work for our company. I like to say that I don't make a product, I employ some of the best machinists that you can find. So we have artists, true machinist artists that work for us. And without their help and without their support and without their knowledge, we would be not in existence.
I'm with Philip John, CEO of Thermax. And this is such an exciting story about taking what seems to be kind of a humdrum product and making it modern and exciting. And right here in Connecticut, PJ, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate you coming up.
Thank you for having me.
Well, listen, man, it's the Made in America podcast. So we start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
All right. Well, Thermax makes removable insulation jackets for steam components. Steam is a big consumer of energy in the United States. Most people don't know about it. It happens in boiler rooms or under our feet, but it consumes 8% of the energy in the country. And a lot of the components that go into producing that steam are not insulated, and that's a huge waste of energy. So what we do is we make removable insulation jackets that cover those components and help the energy get to where it needs to go.
I mean, that's a pretty cool product, and I definitely want to get into that. I mean, I think people think of steam and steam energy and the old Hartford Steam Company and maybe like steam ships and steam trains, and like don't kind of realize, how many boiler rooms there are and all these like big facilities. And anyway, we get into all that. But, before we get there, I'm always like super fascinated, PJ, about the why. So why Thermax? Why are you in manufacturing? What's the why?
All right. Well, I'm an engineer at heart. I really like technology, and I like being able to provide solutions where everyone benefits, or as many people as possible. And I came out of the automotive industry and then went into robotics. And in robotics, I learned that there are a lot of industries that are underserved by technology. And I got excitement out of bringing technology to those industries and kind of being the smartest guy in the room. Whereas when you're in a technology space like you are, you might not be. So that's what gets me excited, is providing solutions in a way that nobody's thinking of, and maybe not the latest and greatest, but in the industry we are in, we're making real change.
I'm with Kristen Gunther today, account executive extraordinaire at George Smitten Company, a 5th generation manufacturing business here in Connecticut. Kristen just moved back from Vermont to get back in the business. I am so excited to share her story. Kristen, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, listen, it's the Made in America podcast, Kristen. So we're going to start off with the same 2 questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
We specialize in pressure-sensitive labels, pouches, shrink sleeves, also security printing, tamper-evident. You'll see on the table that we have baggage tags, luggage baggage tags, and RFID-enabled security labels. And why do we make it? Well, for starters, packaging is quite important. And it's important that our customers get what they're looking for and stand out on a shelf. But on top of that, with the RFID and security printing, we can do brand protection and a lot of security tracking. So making sure that, valuables are not lost with RFID and security.
Today, I'm with Keith Corneau, President and CEO of United Steel, New England's largest erector of structural steel. Keith, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, listen, man, it's the Made in America podcast. So we start off with the same 2 questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
So we are a structural steel fabricator and erector. We also fabricate and erect mist metal, stairs, rails. So the structural steel side is really the skeletal structure of the building. So we basically get raw lengths from the mill, say 60 feet long, cut it up into pieces, weld some plate and angle to it, send it out to the field, and erect it with our own cranes and crews. So that's the gist of what we do.
And that becomes the bones of the buildings that we all live and work in, basically?
Correct, yep.
So, that's the what you guys do, but why do you do it? What's the why?
My father started the business back in 1974, sold his pickup truck, sold his motorcycle, bought a pickup truck and a welder. And really he's been a welder ever since, and he's just developed the business. And I think that passion has grown with me. And frankly, the whole United Steel team, in terms of just wanting to grow, wanting to create opportunities for one another. And I think that's really what we're here for.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct, a CompassMSP company.
As always, thank you so much for tuning in and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a community where we can learn and grow together. Your input, feedback, and engagement is critical to making that happen. Please do comment, like, and subscribe so more and more people can hear what we're doing and join our community of growth and success. Thanks so much for tuning in. Talk to you again soon.